Type here. Oh my goodness.
Welcome to our continuing discussion with Brother Paul Guthrie and Brother Rock Mohammed, both based in United States of America. I, Dr. Anuradha, and Mangesh Dahiwale are based in India. Brother Paul has been associated with the Ambedkarite movement for over 25 years. Brother Rock Mohammed is a meditation teacher, and both our brothers are activists. They are also both students of W.D. Farhad. On our continuing discussion today on race and caste, we look at our shared social suffering and struggles for dignity and for reclaiming our human personality. I now request Mangesh sir to take over the proceedings.
Thank you, Anuradha, for joining today, and we are very happy to see you and have you in this program. Also, Brother Paul and Brother Rock, how are you doing? Very lovely to see you.
Thanks.
Last time we missed you, Brother Rock, and this is our fourth conversation. I think it is one of the very important leg of our conversations today that we are going to have is exploring the Buddhist context for the race and caste. And I think this is very important as we talk today, because the Ambedkarite movement, as we know, has been looking at Buddhism as an emancipatory mechanism from the liberation from their liberation from the hell of caste. So I will just have a small preface about our talk today. As we know that the Buddha was the first person who really launched a movement for the colorless society. So before his enlightenment, the Buddha had 5 dreams. And I'm not going to go into all of his 5 dreams that the Buddha saw before his enlightenment. One of his dreams was very remarkable, where the Buddha is sitting in meditation and the birds of 4 different colors from 4 different directions come near the Buddha, and they touch the body of the Buddha. And upon touching the body of the Buddha, the birds of 4 colors become colorless. So from this dream of the Buddha, one of the 5 dreams before the enlightenment, we can see that the Buddha had a dream, a vision of a society which was colorless. Because as we have seen that Varna has that implication of color, and Buddha really wanted to have a community which was colorless. So when we look at the Buddhist history, or even we look at the history of the world, the Buddha was the first person to articulate this vision, this dream of a society where there will not be any discrimination, neither based on color, nor on the basis of caste or Varna, or on the base of gender or your economic profile. Nothing whatsoever. So Buddha's revolution was remarkably devoted to bringing the equality, and by which he meant breaking the barriers between the human beings. So after the enlightenment, Buddha really challenged the view that some people are born high and some people are born low, and therefore we see that in the Buddhist Tipitaka, in the Pali text, we encounter a lot of texts, and I'm going to name some of the texts which goes into depth of it as to how Buddha promoted, practiced what we can today call the radical equality, a vision of a colorless society, a vision of a varnaless society, a vision of, now we can further it, a vision of a casteless society, a raceless society. So that was the vision of the Buddha, and many a times he challenged the gradation based on the Varna system in a lot of different texts. He says that among the human beings, there is no scope for any discrimination. There can be varieties of the plants, there can be varieties of the animal species, but there is no scope for any discrimination between human beings, no scope whatsoever. And as we know that the Buddha has opened the doors of enlightenment for the women as well. And, he in fact had kind of a vision of this kind of a society. So if you look at the Pali text, particularly sutta like Vasalla Sutta, where Buddha says that one is not a Brahmin by birth, but only by their deeds people can be superior in morals. They can only be spiritually awakened beings. And he goes on saying this in one of the interesting sutta. He challenges the very notion of discrimination between the human beings. In one of the suttas called Kuttadanta Sutta, the Buddha really goes into heart of it and challenges the, I would say, racial and the caste discrimination, because from the dreams of the Buddha we can see that he had that vision of a colorless society. And now when we look at the opposition that the Buddha met, Buddha launched the revolution that was so profound that it changed the face of the humanity, not only in the Indian subcontinent, but in China, Japan, and wherever Buddhism went, it always tried to, inculcate this value of equality. And Buddha was so popular that there was a period in the Indian history where the caste system, the racial system were completely, totally leveled down. And that was sort of a golden period for the country. And then when we come to the responses that the Buddha faced, Buddha was called the dark man. Buddha was called the dark man, black man. And the Buddha was called Shudra, means lower caste. And that is what we get in a lot of texts, that the Buddha was called a black man. And our African Americans brothers or people from Africa, they were always astonished to look at the Buddha, because when they looked at the Buddha, they found that, oh, he's just like us. They took his hair, for their curly hair and so on and so forth. And this fascination is so much so reflected in some of the scholars that we know. The fascination for the Buddha, particularly, if we look at the W.E.B. Du Bois, he has references to the Buddha. We look at the friendship of Martin Luther King with the venerable monk from Vietnam, Thich Nhat Hanh. It is said that he recommended his name, Thich Nhat Hanh's name, for the Nobel Prize. So we see that there are some references which says that during his student days, Martin Luther King also came in contact, studied some of the sutras, particularly of the Mahayana tradition. So what we are trying to get it at is there was a definite fascination for Buddhism, and Buddhism has really played a role in Indian subcontinent and outside to really bring back the raceless or colorless society. Now, when I'm talking about this, when there was this burgeoning social and civil rights movement in India, led by Babasaheb Ambedkar and a host of other social revolutionaries, they looked at the Buddha as a role model for the non-Brahmin movement. So I'm going to put up some name here like Pandit Ayodhitas from South India, Periyar, and then even Mahatma Jyotiba Phule, and of course Babasaheb, who looked at the Indian history from the dynamics of revolution and counter-revolution. The people propagating a view that the people are born high and low, against that the Buddha or Buddhist movement propagating a view that people cannot be treated like that, they are all equal. In fact, some of the very important writings which have come up, in the last century, one literature written by a very famous Sri Lankan man who was also the founder of the World Fellowship of Buddhist Society. He wrote a tract based on the Buddhist text saying how Buddha is against the race and caste discrimination. His name is G.P. Malala Sekara, and he in fact submitted that document to United Nations, and we can still get a hold of that copy and look into it. So I think there is a definite, if you look at the history of the world, we can see that the Buddha was the first person who dreamed of a society which is colorless, casteless, even classless. And he had this, he also brought this vision into practice by bringing people from all different directions and tried to create a feeling of a community, which of course Martin Luther King also called beloved community, and what Babasaheb Ambedkar called Prabuddha Bharat. And if we take it further, the Sukhavati, the land of happiness. So with these few remarks, I would welcome my two brothers to comment on, or to, whatever they would like to reflect on the topic today.
Brother Rock? Well, I thought about while you were talking about the casteless society. I recall when I talked about W.D. Farad, how he set up the Nation of Islam, where you had the minister, you have the FOI, which are the soldiers, you have the merchants, and then you have the laborers. He set up a system that was like the caste system, but it was colorless. He didn't say the only people that were running those particular divisions, it was more like the original social system that was in India before they put Varna on top of it.
Right.
You know, we always had those classes in throughout society, but in W.D. Farad's particular system, there was no color. So he was introducing these ideas to us through culture. And so I was happened to be reading a book he wrote called The Supreme Wisdom. And there's a problem in the Supreme Wisdom called, problem number 13. And problem number 13, when you read it, it's again making that connection. So I'm gonna just read it. It's real brief. It says, big fields are awaiting the wide awake man to work out. Arise the dead by the thousands. The dead nation must arise, for the time is at hand. Look into your poison book. Work cheerfully, and fear not. You are the righteous, the best, and the powerful. Now, one of the things I want to point out about this passage is the beginning, where he says, big fields are awaiting the wide awake man to work out. That title, wide awake man, was not something that was common in the Black community.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't know what that was. We didn't know what it meant, if it had any significance. We just thought maybe it was a cool way of saying somebody that was aware of things.
Mm-hmm.
But it so happens that that particular phrase is a definition of what the word Buddha means, which is to be wide awake, the wide awake man.
Yeah.
And so what makes this passage unique is that, to me, it's more of, I was telling Paul this yesterday, that to me it's kind of like a love letter. Different from anything else that you read in this book, this is something directly from him. And he's saying at this particular stage, and from my opinion, that at this stage of development, being wide awake, you're capable of raising the dead by the thousands. You know, being able to look in the poison book, which he called the Bible, that's what W.D. Farad called the Bible, to see the truth.
Right.
Work cheerfully and fear not. That's the attitude of a practicing Buddhist.
That's true.
You know, you are the righteous, the best, and the powerful.
Right.
Well, that's actually describing the very nature of a practitioner. It's describing our attitude and our capacity.
Right.
And so I'm saying that to say that, you know, W.D. Farad played an integral role in really getting us to this conversation.
Right.
And this was, again, one of the seeds, if you will, that he left behind to help us get here. A lot of these things Paul was gracious enough to point out, but we always had questions about, like when you talk about a colorless society, one of the things that W.D. Farad taught us was that he called the white man the colored man.
Right.
And that, I told Paul the other day, that was confusing, because I was born in under his teachings, under W.D. Farad's teaching. So even as a child, hearing that confused me. He said, first of all, he asked two questions. He asked the first question, he said, who is the original man?
Right.
And I remember Paul pointing out that terminology, original man, has something to do with the word Adivasi.
Original in heaven. Yeah.
Adivasi is the term that was originally used to describe what you guys call scheduled caste. Is that correct?
Scheduled tribes, yeah. Scheduled tribe, scheduled caste, yeah.
The original inhabitants. So when W.D. Farad introduced, that question, he didn't ask who was the first man. He asked us who was the original man. So this again was another seed to help us get to this conversation.
Right.
Because that question directly is a something that has been pondered upon in India for decades, or longer. So, but when he said, "Who is the colored man?" See, over here we were called colored. That's what they called us. So, like I was saying, as a child, it was puzzling. It was like, why is he calling the white man the colored man? We the colored man. So anyway, but the connection was, again, it was Varna. It was bringing us back to India to understand that there is a serious problem that's going on in India that we need to be aware of, that we have direct connection to. You see? So who is the colored man? The colored man is a Caucasian white man, of Yakub's grafted devil, skunk of the planet Earth. Right? That was the answer. So it was, again, tying us back to Yakub, who in India is known as Manu, who set up this birth control law to create the white race.
Right.
And so he kind of told us a story under different names about Yakub and his birth control law, which today we can say is eugenics. They never stopped practicing his birth control law. Today the modern terminology would be called eugenics. Because all Yakub did was take the black original man and had him breed down with a lighter skin complexion until he got to the white.
Right.
You see, that's eugenics, because from what we were taught by W.D. Farad, his whole plan was to make not so much a superior race in every way, but he gave them knowledge called tricknology that they would be able to use to temporarily bamboozle and rule us, the original people, for a certain amount of time. And we were taught by W.D. Farad that was 6,000 years. And now their time is up. And that's why this conversation is significant, because we're actually attacking the problem. The root of racism, the root of this ignorance that has plagued the world, that has enslaved both our people, is caste. Period. That has been what has crippled society, that has created classism based on race, that has enabled one people to overthrow and control and oppress and dehumanize. That is the root of the problem. And now, for the first time in history, together, we're combining forces to attack the root of the world's problems, which is caste.
Right. Very interesting.
And I believe we'll be successful. I think this thing is coming tumbling down, and we will have a casteless and colorless society.
Yes. Very beautifully said.
Yeah, I would piggyback off of that and say that the Buddha set up a school that was also a social change movement. It was a movement that was designed to bring about, as both speakers have said, a colorless, casteless, and a classless society, where Varna or race are not the deciding factors in where a person is placed in the society. W.D. Farad taught the same thing. He taught a social movement, something designed, as Brother Rock said, to arise the dead. And by the dead, he meant those who are made dead in our heads, mentally dead, not the physically dead, but the mentally dead, those who are broken, those who are crushed, Dalits, or all of the Mulnivasis around the world.
Yes.
Original people around the world who have been put underneath the chains of a class and caste and color.
Right.
W.D. Farad also taught that he didn't want any type of importance among the people at the people in positions of power, so-called positions of power, and those who they serve. He didn't want any type of importance among them. That's in his instructions that he left. So he was laying out something that was not based on caste or class, even though, because as Brother Rock pointed out, the system of caste or color is almost like a skunk. So it's called the skunk of the planet Earth. So, if a skunk is present and a skunk leaves, you can still tell that the skunk had been there because of the smell, of the odor that's left behind. So if we go into different countries where there is just, let's say, black people living in those countries, you will find that same system set up there, even though the persons or those who brought that system into those lands is no longer there. But the system is there, and that system has a smell to it. And we want to clean that out. We have to get rid of that system. And so that system is found in Africa. It's found here in the US, even among organizations. Many of the students of W.D. Farad still practice some type of colorism. So that if you look, you will see that consistently you find those who are darker on the bottom, and the leadership or those up on the top always just so happen to be, paler skinned, right? So there is a premium placed on caste, on color, even among these groups, revolutionary groups. And I would take it so far to say even among many of the students of W.D. Farad. India, for example, there's also a large emphasis placed on skin color, so that there's all kinds of skin creams and things like that to get rid of dark skin and to look other than how one is born. And so those systems have to be done away with. And Dr. Ambedkar fought against that. His students fight against that. And the Buddha fought against that, as Mangesh pointed out.
This is very interesting information that we are hearing for the first time. And as we were exploring the connections between our communities and the history of untouchability and the history of slavery, we have touched in last conversations, we have touched a lot of points, and we have covered a lot of ground on this. But one of the things that is that still strikes me, that on 14th October 1956, when Babasaheb Ambedkar converted in Nagpur with 500,000 people, I think that is very historic, because it has never happened in the history of the world that on one single day so many people embraced the, if we quote unquote, the religious teaching or religious belief, if we have to use this word. So embracing the Buddha and his Dhamma on that day has created ripples in the world. because that was a big news. And I don't know, how the African Americans received it, whether they were knowing that this is happening, because some of the African Americans were really knowing what's happening in India, and if not, there was a lot of information, but there was some information about Babasaheb Ambedkar and like that. So can you please, two gentlemen, two brothers, tell us about have you, in your research, have you found any response to this great conversion movement that took place in India to fight the caste discrimination, to fight this racial discrimination, the class discrimination? Did you, in your research, find out any information on any African American activist taking on this topic of mass conversion to Buddhism?
Yes, we did know. We did know. It was talked about in the Pittsburgh Courier in 1957, February of 1957. And the Pittsburgh Courier was the newspaper of record for Black people here in this country. And there was an article written by George Schuler, and we talked about George Schuler on our last talk. And I was saying, I don't know how far you want to go down the rabbit hole on this. I just mentioned a couple things about him. But George Schuler wrote an article in February of 1957 where he talks directly about Dr. Ambedkar and directly about the caste system, and directly how Dr. Ambedkar was bringing millions of people, actually, because it was 500,000 present with him, except there were many who were not present with him who also converted. So it was a very large conversion. And it was the first time, Mangesh, as you mentioned, in history that such a large, movement took place among the people there or anywhere in the world. And it was a movement against caste, against colorism. And for the first system that, or the first school that had ever been set up that taught against slavery, suffering, and death. And that's the Dhamma. And that's the school that is the oldest school that teaches against slavery of any kind. All of the other schools, ancient schools, they have rules of how to treat slaves, or that slavery is some type of a divinely inspired institution. And we need to reject that part of those schools. And the Dhamma, of course, never did teach any type of slavery. So it's custom made for people who have suffered underneath the slave systems of the world. But yes, there was a big splash made by Dr. Ambedkar in the U.S. in 1956, and in those days leading up to that, and in the subsequent days. That was, however, sort of hidden away. So they don't teach about it in the Black history courses. There was a number of organizations here in this country that tried to downplay it. They tried to downplay the movement of our brothers and sisters there to embrace the Dhamma. And they tried to downplay it because it was a political move. They were teaching in other schools. So you'll see in 1957 and 1958, a lot of news articles talking about Buddhism. Buddhism worships all of these different gods, and Buddhism believes in spooks and spirits, a spirit god. So they were accidentally conflating the Dhamma with the caste system, Brahmanism. They thought that Buddhism was the same as the caste system, Hinduism. And so they were describing in those articles, in those many, many articles,
very interesting,
Hinduism, but they were calling it Buddhism because they didn't know what the difference was.
Right,
They didn't know what the difference was. And they had their own political, religious bents.
Mhm.
And this was going completely against it. But it was big news. It was big news. And it was a opportunity for us then, during the creation of the civil rights movement. It was a perfect opportunity for us to join forces at that time. We missed that opportunity, except now we can look back and see the importance of it and how it's important nowadays, relevant now, because all of the issues and the questions that are being raised right now are things that are directly addressed by the Dhamma. Dr. Ambedkar wrote a book that's called The Buddha or Karl Marx. Are you familiar with that work? Are you familiar with that work called The Buddha or Karl Marx? Okay, I can't hear you, except there's a book that's called...
Yes,
Yes, sir.
Yes,
There's a
we
book
are
that's
familiar.
called The Buddha or Karl Marx. And right now there's a big movement happening in this country towards the socialist plan. And Dr. Ambedkar shows that the Dhamma, Karl Marx answers all of the questions raised by socialism, because the socialists, they want a state. They want state power. And there's a few other things that they also want, except all of those points and questions are actually addressed very clearly in a very old system that doesn't just go back to Karl Marx, who was just trying to show scientific socialism as opposed to the utopian version of socialism. But yes, in direct response to what you were asking, there was a lot of people knew about what Dr. Ambedkar was doing. It was suppressed, though. That news was suppressed, and people moved on. It was a lost opportunity.
Do we have any excerpts from the report that was published by George Schuller? Can we read a little bit from there? Do we have a copy of that?
Are you able to upload any type of documents? Because I have a copy that...
You can definitely share it, on, if you like, you can share it for the audience to look at it.
Okay. I'm not too familiar with this platform, so I don't know how to do that.
If you just go to the share screen, you see the bottom, there is a share screen option. So
okay.
if you click it,
I did mail to you a copy of that document. So if you look in your documents, you may find it there. I have two copies. One is highlighted, and the other is not highlighted.
Okay.
And it's from the Pittsburgh Courier, February of 1957. That
means that is after only a couple of months after the conversion.
Correct. So, and Gandhi, Nehru's daughter, was visiting the U.S. And George Schuller was saying she has a lot of nerve.
Right.
Because they're promoting, caste. Except there are some highlighted areas in there where you can see where he talks about Dr. Ambedkar and the Dalits and untouchability. That's very, very important, because that news was suppressed, but it was in the largest black paper in the country. A lot of people knew about it. They were excited about it, except it would cause political change in this country. There were groups in this country that wanted to suppress that. So they offered articles downplaying Buddhism as a answer to the problems of caste and race in this country.
It's written very beautifully. It's a long article by Mr. Schuller. And, this, I will just read the last paragraph, because I think it's so important for the audience to know it. True, the untouchables are represented in the central legislature by 70 seats and state legislatures by 483 seats. and by many big political job holders, but the masses of untouchables are still out of luck. He further writes, they are low. What Mr. Schuller is saying is they are low men on the color caste totem pole. The darker the man, the more inferior he is supposed to be, even though, like the late Dr. Ambedkar,